Hi friends! Happy Tuesday evening. I hope you're all doing well. Thank you for joining Get Your Play Online. My name is Amanda, and this evening on Get Your Play Online, Bedtime Stories with Amanda, we are going to be starting the series Ivy and Bean by Annie Barrows and Sophie Blackall. Do any of you out there have this series? If you do and you haven't read the first book, grab it off of your shelf, curl up on your couch or your bed, and why don't you join me? Let's start. Ivy plus Bean, book 1. Now, for those who don't know, this is a series book, so it's a chapter book. That means there's not going to be pictures, and if there are, they're very minimal pictures. Alrighty. So if you have this book, please turn to page 7 and let's begin. No thanks. Before Bean met Ivy, she didn't like her. Bean's mother was always saying that Bean should try playing with the new girl across the street. But Bean didn't want to. She's 7 years old, just like you, said her mother, and she seems like such a nice girl. You could be friends. I already have friends, said Bean. And that was true. Bean did have a lot of friends. But really, she didn't want to play with Ivy because her mother was right. Ivy did seem like such a nice girl. Even from across the street, she looked nice. But nice, Bean knew, is another word for boring. Ivy sat nicely on her front steps. Bean zipped around her yard and yelled. Ivy had long, curly red hair pushed back with a sparkly headband. Bean's hair was black, and it only came to her chin because it got tangled if it was any longer. When Bean put on a headband, it fell off. Ivy wore a dress every day. That's Ivy in her dress. And there is Bean, trying to do a handstand. Bean wore a dress when her mother made her. Ivy was always reading a big book. Bean never read big books. Reading made her jumpy. Bean was sure that Ivy never stomped in puddles. She was sure that Ivy never smashed rocks to find gold. Bean hatches a plan. It all began because Bean was playing a trick on her older sister. Bean's older sister was named Nancy. She was 11. Nancy thought Bean was a pain and a pest. Bean thought Nancy was a boogerhead. Ever since she turned 11, Nancy had been acting like she was Bean's mother. She ordered Bean around in a grown-up voice. Comb your hair. No more pretzels. Brush your teeth. Say please. Bean's mother said that Nancy was going through a stage. Bean knew what that meant. That meant Nancy was bossy. Bean also knew that nobody likes bossy kids, so she was trying to help Nancy be done with her stage. Here's how she helped. She bugged Nancy until Nancy freaked out. Bean thought this was pretty helpful. The afternoon that Bean got her great idea, she was shopping with her mom, Nancy. Actually, Bean was being dragged along by her mom and Nancy. Bean hated shopping. Nancy loved it. Nancy was trying on skirts, lots of skirts. She put on a purple skirt. She looked at her front in the mirror. Then she turned to the side. Then she turned around and tried to look at her behind. Looks good, said Bean. Let's go. Be patient just a little longer, Bean, said Bean's mother. I think it's cute, honey, she said to Nancy. Nancy looked in the mirror some more. Do you think the pockets are dumb? I like the pockets, said Bean's mom. There's Bean, and it looks like she's bugging her sister Nancy. Get it, get it, get it, moaned Bean. She had never been so bored in her entire life. She was so bored she fell on the floor. Then she took a tiny peek up at the lady in the dressing room next door. Yo, get up, Bean, said her mother. This minute. Bean got up and sat on the triangle seat again. She waited. Nancy looked at herself. I kind of like it, Nancy said, but it costs $40. That's all my money. I could get 2 shirts for $40. Don't be a tightwad, said Bean. She had just learned that word. It meant someone who didn't like to spend money. Don't call your sister a tightwad, said Bean's mom. Bean saw Nancy's eyes looking at her in the mirror. Tightwad, Bean mouthed without any sound. Nancy's eyes got narrow and so quick that their mother didn't see. She stuck out her tongue. Then Nancy turned to their mother and said, I think the skirt costs too much, Mom. I think I'd rather try on some tops. Bean knew then that Nancy was being slow on purpose, just to drive her crazy. Bean thought about kicking her in the shin, but then she got the idea. It was a great idea. It was also a helpful idea, one that would teach Nancy not to be such a tightwad. And best of all, her idea would make Nancy freak out. You'll be sorry, Bean mouthed to Nancy. The Ghost of Pancake Court. Bean was hiding inside a big round bush in her front yard. The bush was right next to the sidewalk, and it was very scratchy and sticky inside. But Bean needed to be in the bush for her plan to work. Here's how Bean's plan went. She took a $20 bill out of Nancy's purse and taped a long thread to it. She put the $20 bill on the sidewalk. Then she held on to the other end of the thread and climbed into the bush. Uh-oh, I smell trouble. Nancy would be coming home from school soon. She would see the money on the sidewalk. She would bend down to pick it up. Bean would quickly pull the money away, and then Nancy would freak out. Bean could hardly wait. There was only one problem. Nancy didn't come. Bean sat inside the bush for a long time. A branch poked her arm. Leaves fell down her shirt. She itched. She waited. Nothing happened. It was very quiet. Bean was hardly ever this quiet for this long. Because there was nothing else to do, she looked at the house across the street. Really, it wasn't across the street. It was around the street. Bean loved her street. The first reason was its name, Pancake Court. The second reason was that it ended in a big circle right in front of Bean's house. Her dad called it a cul-de-sac. Bean called it cool. If Bean started riding her bicycle at the end of the block and pedaled really, really hard, she could whiz around the circle, tilting low over the sidewalk like a motorcycle racer. See, Bean? She's riding like a motorcycle racer. Slam! Bean looked up. She saw Ivy come out onto her porch and plop down on the top step. Bean squinted at her. Ivy looked strange. She wasn't wearing a dress today. She was wearing a black bathrobe with lots of little pieces of paper stuck to it. Weird, thought Bean. She squinted some more. Instead of a big book, Ivy was carrying a stick painted gold. Bean made a face. What a goony costume, she thought. What a dork. Ivy sat. She didn't do anything. She just sat there all by herself. That was another strange thing about Ivy. She didn't mind being alone. She never played with anyone. Bean played with Everyone, big kids, little kids, all the kids in the neighborhood played with Bean. Even crummy Matt, who was so crummy he threw other kids' toys into the road, wanted to play with Bean. She took care of the little kids. When they fell down and got blood all over her knees, Bean would take them home to get band-aids. The big kids let her play with them because she had good ideas, like seeing how many backyards they could cross without touching the ground. Bean loved big groups of kids playing big games like pirates or hide and seek. Sometimes Bean wished she were an orphan so she could live in an orphanage with 100 other kids. Of course, she didn't tell her mother and father that. Bean watched Ivy alone on her front porch. Wasn't she lonely? Now, Ivy was muttering something that Bean couldn't hear, and then she began to wave the stick in the air. Bean couldn't stand it anymore. "What the heck are you doing?" yelled Bean from inside her bush. Ivy looked all around. Bean forgot that Ivy couldn't see her. "What's with the stick?" she yelled. Ivy's eyes got big. "Who's there?" she said. "Are you a ghost?" "A ghost? What a great idea!" Bean made her voice scratchy and spooky. "Yes," she howled. "I am the ghost of Mr. Killop. I lived in your house before." Mr. Killop had actually moved to Ohio, but Bean thought it was more interesting if she had told her that he had passed away. "I've come to haunt you tonight when you're sleeping. I'll wrap my icy fingers around and I'll touch your neck." "Bean, what are you yelling about?" "Whoops," it was Nancy. Bean meets Ivy. There's Bean hiding in the bush. And if you look carefully, she has the money on the string waiting for Nancy to walk by. But remember, when she was hiding in the bush, she was watching Ivy do something with a stick. Bean peeked out between leaves. Nancy hadn't seen the $20 bill. She was standing on it. Thought Bean. Her plan was a bust. But if she kept on being a ghost, maybe she could scare Nancy a little. "I'm going to wrap my fingers around you," she howled in her spooky voice. "And I'm going to spit in your ear." "Ooh." "No, you're not," said Nancy. She didn't sound scared. She reached into the bush and yanked Bean out. "Stop yelling." That's when she saw the $20 bill. "Hey," she said, "where did you get the money?" "You don't have $20. Then she saw the string. "I see what you're doing, burnt face. I bet this is my money too." Then she picked up the bill and looked at it. "You stole my money. I'm telling Mom." She began to pull Bean toward the front door. Uh-oh, thought Bean. None of her ideas were working out today. Now she had two choices. She could go inside with Nancy and face Mom, or she could run. What should she do? So Bean fell over on the ground and started to wail. "My ankle! Ow! Ow! My ankle's killing me. It's sprained." She held her ankle. Nancy frowned. "You didn't sprain your ankle, you faker," she said, but she bent down to take a look. What a good big sister. That was all Bean needed. She stood up and ran. She ran out of her yard and around Pancake Court until she found herself in front of Ivy's house. "Oh, you're in trouble now, Bernice Blue," yelled Nancy. "I'm going to tell Mom." Bernice was Bean's real name. People used it only when they were yelling at her. Are you ever called by your first and middle name when you get in trouble? Like Bean? Remember, her real name is Bernice Blue. Bean couldn't help it. She just had to stick her tongue out and say, then she just had to turn around and wiggle her behind at Nancy. What a silly girl. That's it, Nancy yelled. I'm getting Mom. She stormed into the house. For a minute, Bean felt happy. She loved making Nancy mad. But when Nancy was gone, Bean began to worry. Mom hated it when she did more than one bad thing at a time. Bean counted, taking the money, lying about her ankle, leaving the yard without asking, and wiggling her behind at Nancy. 4 things. 5 if you counted pretending to be a ghost. Bean was going to be in big trouble. How big? No dessert for sure. No videos for a week maybe, but it could be worse. And there she is counting all the bad things that she did. The money, pretending to sprain her ankle, running away from Nancy, shaking her behind at Nancy, and pretending to be a ghost when she was in the bush. Her mom might send her to her room for the rest of the day. Bean hated that. Hide. Bean looked up. She had forgotten all about Ivy. Ivy was still sitting on her porch. She had been watching the whole time. She knew that the ghost of Mr. Killop was really Bean inside the bush. Bean expected her to be mad, but she didn't look mad. She looked excited. Hide, she said again. Thought Bean. Maybe boring Ivy was right. If her mom couldn't find her, she couldn't send her to her room. If she stayed out until dark, her parents would stop being mad and start being worried. Her mom might say, "Oh, my poor little Bean, my poor little baby." Then they'd be so happy to see her when she came limping home that they probably wouldn't punish her at all. They might even let her have seconds on dessert. That settles it. Okay, she said to Ivy. Where? Follow me. Ivy came down the stairs and slipped behind a bush growing against her house. Bean followed her and crouched down under the wide leaves. No, get up. This is just the beginning, said Ivy. I'm going to take you to a secret spot. This isn't it, asked Bean. The bush looked pretty good to her. No. This is the passageway. Ivy pressed her back against the house and edged along. Bean edged along too, the wall scraping her back. They turned a corner and edged some more. Ivy's house was big. Halt, said Ivy. Bean halted. Now, said Ivy, close your eyes and I'll take you to the secret spot. What? How come I have to close my eyes? Because it's a secret, said Ivy. Duh. Bean couldn't argue with that. Ivy looked like a wimp, but she didn't talk like one. Bean closed her eyes. She felt Ivy take her by the elbow, and together they went down some steps. A door opened. More steps. Cool, damp air blew on Bean's face. Then they went up some steps. Another door. Open. They were outside again. Ivy was taking Bean through some tall grass. Shh, said Ivy suddenly. Bean froze. Crouch down, said Ivy. Bean crouched. There was silence. Okay, you can get up now. What happened? Asked Bean. Spies, said Ivy. Bean figured Ivy was probably making that up. Now you can open your eyes, Ivy said. Do you see them walking through the tall grass? And look, a black cat is with them. Ivy hatches a plan. Bean opened her eyes. They were in a corner of Ivy's backyard. There was a big rock on one side and a small tree on the other. Between them was a perfectly round puddle. This is the secret spot, asked Bean. She had expected something more secret-looking, like a cave. Yes, they'll never find you here, said Ivy. You can stay for as long as you want. I'll bring you food. But I only need to stay until dinner time, Bean said. Ivy looked disappointed. I thought you wanted to run away. I do, but only till dinner. Oh. Bean felt bad about not staying. Wouldn't you get in trouble if your parents found out I was living here, she asked. They don't come out here much, Ivy said. My mom is afraid of ticks. You probably don't ever get in trouble anyway, said Bean, feeling glum. I'm always in trouble. I do too get in trouble, said Ivy. No, you don't, Bean said. You read books all the time. You can't get in trouble for reading books. Ivy said, I will get in trouble, really huge trouble, if I do what I want to do. What I plan to do. Bean waited. Well, what do you plan to do? Ivy looked all around before she whispered, spells, magic, potions. Really? You mean like a witch? Yes. Well, not really. But I'm going to be a witch, said Ivy. Her eyes were glowing. I'm learning how. Bean looked at Ivy's black bathrobe. It was kind of dirty now, and some of the little pieces of paper had fallen off. Bean saw that the papers were cut into stars and moons in the shape of moons. Bean also saw that Ivy didn't know how to draw stars. Some of them had 4 points and some only had 3. The moon didn't look so good either. Is that a witch's robe, she asked. Yeah, said Ivy. Did you make it yourself? Asked Bean. Yeah. It's nice, said Bean politely. It didn't look like a witch's robe. It looked goofy. I didn't know you could learn to be a witch, I thought. You just had to be one. That's what most people think, said Ivy. But I'm learning. I probably know more than most born witches my age. I just learned this spell that makes you invisible. Wow. Bean could use that for sure. Will you teach me? That would be great. I haven't done it yet, Ivy admitted. You've got to have a dead frog. Oh. It would be really mean to kill a frog. Yeah, that's why I dug this pond, Ivy pointed to the puddle with her gold stick. I'm hoping a frog will come here and die. Bean didn't mention that it looked like a puddle. Wow, she said. What's the stick for? That's my wand, said Ivy. Bean couldn't help it. She burst out laughing. That's not a wand. That's just a stick painted gold. It is too a wand. Now Ivy looked mad. You better watch out or I'll use it on you. Bean stopped laughing. Use it how? I'll cast the dancing spell on you. You won't be able to stop dancing for the rest of your life. Like this. She started jumping up and down, kicking out her legs and waggling her arms. Could you really? Asked Bean. Ivy stopped dancing. Maybe I was just going to test it when you started yelling about being a ghost. Who were you going to test it on? Asked Bean. Ivy's face turned red. Nobody, she said. Bean could tell she was lying. Come on, who? Ivy's face got redder. Come on, tell me, said Bean. Ivy looked at the dirt. You, she said in a low voice. Me? Yelped Bean. What did I ever do to you? I'm sorry, said Ivy. She did look sorry. That's okay, said Bean. There was a pause. My mother keeps on saying what a nice girl you are, Ivy said. She's always telling me I should play with you. It's driving me nuts. Bean couldn't believe it. That's what my mother says about you. That's so funny. But you're not nice at all. You're a witch. Ivy giggled. You're not nice either. You were doing that ghost thing in the bush. Bean was embarrassed. The part about the icy fingers was good, said Ivy. What were you doing in there anyway? Bean sat down on the rock. I was waiting for Nancy. That's my sister. She's a total pain in the kazoo. I put $20 on a string, and I was going to pull it out of her hand when she reached down to pick it up. Ivy nodded. Is that why she got mad at you? No, she got mad at me because it was her $20. Bean felt glum again. Ivy saw that Bean was worrying. Are you going to be in trouble? Yeah, probably. I'm not supposed to mess with her money, Bean thought. You don't have a going back in time spell, do you? No. Those are hard, said Ivy. She looked at her pond. I wish I had a dead frog. That would be good, said Bean. But wait a second. What about the dancing spell? Could you put it on Nancy? So she'll dance for the rest of her life? How's that going to get you out of trouble? Ivy asked. It's not, said Bean, but it would be really funny. Can you see Nancy dancing? We're going to end there. And when I meet with all of you again in 2 Tuesdays from tonight, we'll continue to read and learn a little more about what Ivy and Bean are doing and how their friendship starts to blossom. I like this series because it's lovely to see that 2 girls who live in the same neighborhood didn't really know each other, and the moms knew better. The moms knew best and knew that each of the girls were nice and that they could actually become friends. Is there somebody in your neighborhood that you don't really know that maybe your mom or dad or some adult in your life is saying, hey, why don't you go across the street and knock on the door and make friends with that individual? It's always wonderful to make a new friend. So we will see what Ivy and Bean continue to do the next time that I'm with you for bedtime stories with Get Your Play Online. Again, we started book number 1 of Ivy plus Bean by Annie Barrows and Sophie Blackall. Thank you for joining me this evening, and I can't wait to read more and find out about these 2 girls and what they do and what adventures come their way. I hope you all have a wonderful evening. Have a wonderful rest of the week, and don't forget, all week long, check out all the other bedtime stories that are going to be read to you. Have yourself a wonderful evening and take care. Good night.